what the government cares about is minimizing risk. So going back to building relationships, my relationship with the government is good because I have what's called past performance. And the government cares greatly about past performance.
Welcome to the Dynamis podcast, where we are all about unlocking a fruitful life, removing your limiting beliefs, and getting to the next level. My name is Tim Garul, and I'm stoked to grow on this journey with you. As David Geffen says, we are each the figment of our own imagination, and some people have the greater ability to imagine than others. Welcome into this week's episode of the Dynamis podcast. We have a familiar voice and face in the studio this week. We are in Austin, Texas, at one of my long time and really good friend, Tyrel Rose. He's been on the podcast a number of times. He's probably my most frequent repeat guest, and some of that is just because he's a good friend, and when we get together, we turn the microphones on. So we've been hanging out in Austin, Texas this week. Our kids have been on spring break, or at least mine have, and they have just had a blast playing all week. Today we hit up a barbecue spot, a really cool Egyptian barbecue spot called KG Barbecue. Went to Lake Travis afterward, or was it Travis or Austin?
We went to Lake Austin afterwards.
Lake Austin. We tried Lake Travis and there was no water where we went to swim.
A little dry.
A little dry, but we just been having a really fun week. And we're sitting in his garage, so if you hear some gurgling or kids playing in the background, it's just we're down and dirty podcasting, and it's okay because we have a lot of really cool information. And I know for you guys just tuning in who haven't listened to past episodes with Tyrel's been on this really cool journey of government contracting, and his evolution in the contracting space has really been interesting. And it started from really just hearing about the opportunity of government contracting, and it's progressed into, him dipping his toe into the water and now being involved in contracting communities and really seeing the potential that exists out there as a government contractor. And it's really exciting to see the momentum he's building and the opportunity on the horizon. And so we're just going to spend this episode talking about the opportunity that is present in government contracting, why I think, and he'll advocate why it's so advantageous to enter into. And there's just so much opportunity, especially if you're a person who is, working a W-2 job and cannot see a path or an alternative for you to own your time, own your income. You don't know what to do. You don't really know if you want to get started real estate investing or whatever it is. This is something that you can start small, it's scalable, and can rapidly replace active income. And so that's what we're going to talk about today.
Yeah, buddy. Since last time I was on your podcast, actually, I think just landed my first contract and had decided to quit my W-2 job because I had proof of concept that this could work, and I was going all in on government contracting.
So let's just give a quick breakdown of, because, you and I have the advantage. We talk about government contracting all the time. Obviously, you're asking me questions about what I'm doing and vice versa. I'm always asking you about what you're doing. But I think let's just back up and start at a 10,000 foot view. What the heck is government contracting, and why is it a blue ocean of opportunity?
So government contracting is providing goods and services to the federal government or state or local government. So me particularly, I focus strictly on the federal government. I don't do state, I don't do local. And the reason for that is because the federal government is the largest purchaser in America and one of the largest purchasers in the world. Everything that the government buys, every vehicle, every building, every piece of toilet paper is purchased usually through one of three websites. And it's 13% of GDP.
13%.
13% of our entire economy
is spending from the federal government.
Federal government.
For like goods and projects or whatever.
Goods and services. If you can think of everything that the federal government encompasses, if you think national parks, Bureau of Land Management, every military base, every post office, that's a federal building. So if they need someone to re-roof,
Social Security, whatever it is.
NASA.
The military.
Yep.
Federal police agencies.
Yep. NOAA. Any federal agency they all order the exact same way. That's why I like doing business with the feds. I've worked for a number of these agencies. I've done work for Health and Human Services, specifically Indian Health Services, and I've dug wells and built septic systems for reservations, for new housing on reservations.
So, okay, so this is a good place to interject. So government contracting, just to summarize it at a really elemental and basic level, is the government needs something. They either need a product or they need a service. A product could be they need a bunch of new TVs for conference rooms at a new VA hospital downtown Austin. A product could also be toilet paper, any good that needs to be, national parks need toilet paper. They have to place a bid to get that toilet paper stocked and serviced. And that could be it. It could also be a service like, federal buildings need landscape, lawn care. Could be they need cleaning crews at night to come in and clean buildings. And at the same time, it could also be they need a construction project. Maybe they want to build a new airport, a ground up development building, a gut and renovate. It could be septic tanks that need to be ripped out of the ground and replaced.
Right.
And they cannot, it's prohibited. They cannot just go directly to a third party vendor and subcontract it out. They have to go through an individual like you who subs these projects out.
Yes. Or I could do them direct. Some of the projects I have hands-on and I'll do direct.
So every single thing that the federal government needs, they have to go through an intermediary like you who organizes subcontractors in order to get that done. And what's really cool about this, and I think then we can dig into the idiosyncrasies of it. The really cool thing about this is a couple things. Number, how much did they spend last year? The federal government?
I think it was $3 trillion.
Okay.
I believe is the number.
$3 trillion. In times of economic recession, spending tends to go up for these services, right?
Yes, in times of economic recession, because the government likes to stimulate the economy in a slow economy. So the first place you're going to see jobs is through federal spending, because the only lever that they can personally move.
International conflict, spending goes up. And not only that, but these aren't just, you're not just like a general contractor on individual jobs. Some of these jobs, like you just won a job with a VA hospital to service med gas testing, right?
Yeah, we'll get into that.
Okay, so what's really cool is some of those contracts are residual income contracts that pay for years and years and years to come.
Yeah. Yes. So I have a friend who does as niche as you want to get. He does tires. He's really good at selling tires. And he decided, I'm going to sell tires to the federal government. Well, there's 5 big companies selling tires. This guy said, I can beat them. I can beat their price because I know they're going to jack up the price. And he has. So he just in that niche down saying, I'm going to figure it out. I'm going to figure out who's buying tires and I'm going to sell directly to them. And now he's making tens of thousands of dollars selling this one product that he knows better than anyone else.
So let me ask a question on that, because, from my brain as an entrepreneur standpoint, let's just say I want a contract with the federal government supplying tires for the next 10 years. Okay. If I won that contract, the very next thing that I would do is see if I could take over manufacturing and reduce my wholesale cost. Is that allowable? Can you do that?
Absolutely. It not only is that allowable, that then if you had a serial number, remember in the military, we had things with serial numbers.
Yeah.
They can ask for your part specifically. And then you have kind of a hold on the market, because he is not only supplying the contract, someone else could be a third party, and that could be you say, I'm going to now sell your product to the federal government as well. Here's where you run into a little bit of trouble is the federal government wants American citizens to do their jobs, and they want American-made products, no matter what. All construction jobs, they're trying to stimulate their economy. So if it's a tire manufacturer, it's going to be really hard for you to get a tire manufacturer set up in the U.S. I don't even know if the tire manufacturers that we have now are in the U.S. And if they're not, they need exemptions to come and be sold to the federal government.
Yeah. Which is interesting, because we're seeing more and more a lot of manufacturing move back from China to like Mexico, for example. And I wonder how the federal government, this would be interesting to look into, because you see like a lot of our, large suppliers in the United States, a lot of, electronics, toilets, washers and dryers, Toyota. I mean, Toyota is a Japanese company. However, their American division does a lot of business in the U.S. economy.
Yeah. Do you remember when we had our M9s?
M9 is it's a Beretta handgun, 9mm.
Well, where's Beretta made?
I assumed it was made in.
I think it's a German company.
Yeah.
Right. So how does the U.S. military buy Berettas? That is not an American company. They have to set up their factory in America.
Oh, interesting.
So when you see those companies, they then have an American factory, so they're paying taxes, and then they can supply to the government.
So I overheard a sales call. So this is how it works. Okay, so let's walk through start to finish, and then we can kind of get into, I guess, the more minutia here. So you mentioned that there's 3 websites that they put jobs for bid out on.
Yes. Right? So specifically, I focus on sam.gov. That's the #1 website for finding any contract in the U.S.
And now, to get on those websites, what kind of credentialing do you need?
Anyone can go on the website.
Anybody can go on
right now and take a look. And I did. So I did market research. I found out what was out there before I ever even started bidding on contracts. I started learning the process, seeing what does the government buy? How do they buy? My specialty is I know the federal government's system, and I know how to read their contracts, and they're convoluted because they're federal contracts, but you can go on and look at them and start to read. Just do a search on sam.gov, and in the search bar, put your home city. See what contracts are in your home city, or what is your interest? Like we said, tires. If you just type in something, you'll find something that they sell, and that's the #1 way that the government looks for things to purchase.
So, for example, let's say you're a hometown entrepreneur. You own a small concrete company. You don't care about buying tires for the government. You don't care about septic tanks. You're just wanting to bid concrete jobs. You know concrete. You can compete in concrete. You run concrete crews. So you could literally just stay in your niche of concrete for state, local, or federal contracts, essentially.
And if you have that and you can get contracts locally, those guys crush.
So what makes you said that your zone of genius is being able to understand these contracts and read the language and understand how the government buys things. What makes you, or what made you uniquely qualified to have that gifting?
So what my value add is to the marketplace is that I do understand those government contracts, and it is a pain for small companies who maybe will get one federal project on concrete, not even guaranteed because they have to put it out for a bid. They have to understand how the government bids are laid out. They have to understand how the government wants their bonding done, and they have to understand how to communicate effectively with the government, as well as keep up their yearly, just like any other business. You have to keep up with your registrations in SAM. You have to keep up with, it's a pain to register. It takes probably a month even just to get through the convoluted system.
So this is okay, so let's go back there then. We're on the website. Anybody can look on the website. There's 3 what are the 3 websites?
So it would be sam.gov, Unison Marketplace is another one, and you can look up on like USA Spending or FPDS, even though those not contracts. You can do homework and research any government contract you've ever seen.
Okay.
But really those are the websites that I frequent, and there's spillover between those.
And then within that, okay, you can see these bid for contracts that are being put out there. How are you able to, what kind of credentialing do you need to actually bid and win these jobs?
So you need some kind of credentialing as registered in SAM, and all of the contracts will say you must be registered in sam.gov.
So you need to be registered as a government contractor.
As a government contractor.
And what are the requirements for that?
Own a business in America.
So you just start an LLC that's registered in the United States of America.
That's it.
Be a U.S. citizen, and then you submit to get I guess, your license or whatever. What is it?
Yeah, it's
like a registration
like a
number?
registration, yes.
And that takes about a month, you said?
It takes about a month if you can do everything cleanly. If you mess something up, it's going to keep on adding time. So
and the requirements are like you have to employ U.S. citizens, like those types of things.
That's it. Right? Yep. It's nothing crazy. If you have an LLC and you have an EIN number, you can register.
Got it. So anybody who's providing a service in a particular niche, like, could potentially become a government contractor and provide those services for bid for the federal government.
Right. They can. So again, like where you asked about my zone of genius is, that's a lot of time for a business to register.
Yeah.
They have to put somebody on that. They're probably, the likelihood of them getting a contract is not good.
Because they don't know how to, a lot of what you're doing is like, it's the language of how you write these bids.
It's a language of even how to read the contracts.
Yeah.
Because they're federal contracts. They're not written in plain speak, but they are all written exactly the same. So once you understand them, you can go, okay, I'm looking at section M and section L every time. These are the criteria I need. But in that, there might be 2 pages of useful information and 120 pages per contract of something that's not pertinent to actually doing the job. It's pertinent in understanding the legalities of the contract, but not in completing the work. And if you're selling tires or you're doing concrete, do you care about learning the legalities of the federal government, or do you care about doing a good job in your neighborhood?
Yeah. And this, I mean, obviously it's obvious where you're coming in here is you're partnering with these people who have their zone of genius niches, and you're saying, hey, listen, here's the deal. I'm going to win you bids for the federal government. I'm going to take care of the paperwork, the licensing, whatever it is required for the federal government. You provide your services, and then we can secure these bigger contracts with the federal government, right?
Most people don't want to have to file the paperwork or to submit for the bids. So my goal is to give small businesses access to the biggest purchaser in America, opportunity to work with the federal government to make more money, because the government also sets, they don't set how much you can make a top end, but they do set a bottom end. And so I'm allowing their guys to make more money, for these companies to make more money, and giving them access to the federal government. And in return, I file all their paperwork. I make sure that all the T's are crossed and I's are dotted, and that they are getting in front of the government to get these jobs.
Why not go after larger companies based in the US?
You can, actually. I just personally don't. That's because I'm building my own company. I have a general contracting company for the US government, but I have 2 friends that are consultants. And all they do is go after big companies and say, listen, I'll get you these contracts, or I'll help you win these contracts, but their big companies aren't working with the feds yet. So they just become consultants, and they make 6 figures consulting for large companies. One guy I know, he is working with a nuclear manufacturing facility this is a nuclear tech company, and they weren't working with the federal government. And he got them in working with NASA.
I mean, I'm sitting on the other side of this conversation here, and I'm just thinking about the progression of like scalability. And it seems to me that like your value, like what moves the income needle for you is 2 things. Number 1 is building relationships with subcontractors that can execute cleanly, obviously building a scalable system as far as paperwork and bidding. And so as I'm thinking here, listening to this play out, my thought process is like, okay, if I were coaching you as a business coach right now, what would I encourage you to do more of, and what would I encourage you to offload? I think right now what I would do is probably, and obviously some of this comes from inflow of income, but I think my first focus would be to intimately train a VA on only writing contracts, only submitting bids. Like, here's the language that needs to be submitted. Here's how I want you to reach out to subcontractors to see if they're capable. And then what I would do with my personal time, and what, it sounds like your zone of genius is, you would come in and close the relationships. You'd build rapport, shake the hands, build the show the value add. And the more hands that you can shake, the more this VA, if he knows his zone of genius of what kind of contracts you're looking for, can literally just pump. All he's doing is writing bids for work.
Yeah. And I've thought of that exact same thing. Again, if I became audited, I have to have American employees. And I've asked this question.
Got it.
And so that's a little bit of a gray area.
I see.
However, my first hire, I've thought of that same thing. My first hire would be someone that would be just combing contracts and then filtering them and saying, okay, these are the ones we're going after, contacting the subs, doing the same thing I'm doing now while I continue to build the government side relationships, because nothing happens without, in business, doesn't matter what it is, even here, without relationships. So if you know the government officials who are purchasing, they can't give you the contract. You still have to bid it, but you're going to have more intimate knowledge of what's coming up, what's happening. There are thousands of contracts that go unbid every year. And so when those things come up and no one bids on a contract, there's thousands of contracts right now on sam.gov. I could never bid on all of them. So because there's projects that go unbid, there's work that's going undone, and projects that the government is leaving on the table, and they need to spend that money. And so that department, if you have a relationship with the federal government, they will say, hey, I have this little project. Do you want it? They can go after someone. If no one bid it, hey, please come bid this job because we don't have anyone. And I get emails like that already. So
they'll flip you the scraps just to spend the budget. This is a good,
to spend the budget. So but building relationships is the point.
So we're, I guess, you and I have intimate knowledge of the government because, we once were inside the belly of the beast. And so I think it's important. We are taking for granted the knowledge that we have with government. And here's why I want to explain what you just said and why it's so important. In the military, everybody, every division, every wing, every unit, whatever, is allocated a defined budget for the year. And at the end of that year, if that budget is not spent to totality, then what happens is that the next budget year, they reduce your budget allowance or allocation by that amount. It sounds insane, especially from like the entrepreneur's perspective of like operating lean. Like if you don't need it, don't spend it, right? Like why put yourself in a deficit?
Yeah, it's the inverse of your home budget, because if you don't spend the money, you don't get it again. So you have to prove need.
Yeah.
To prove need, you're not going to prove need if you only spent $10 of the $1,000 you were allotted.
The libertarian in me is like dying inside listening to the opportunity in this job. But the entrepreneur in me is like, okay, they're going to flip you scraps just to get cash off their book so that they get allocated another budget. This is a real life example. When you and I were in the Army, we had a much higher budget than other units. And so we would go to ranges, especially at the end of the budget year, and there would be millions of rounds of ammo. And for days we would cycle through the range trying to burn this ammo, and we couldn't. What we would do is just put our M4s on full auto with the extractor into an ammo bin just to dump rounds. I mean, I remember being at a range and we had pallets of like C4 explosives and det cord, and we just literally blew these entire pallets just because we could not physically make any more charges. It's just plain and simple. We were just getting it off the book, so we got a budget for the same amount next year.
And the reason we didn't have we had that many rounds allotted was because we had 30 personnel in our platoon. But for that time, I know this specific time you were talking about, we had half those guys were in Ranger School or at other trainings or somewhere else. So we only had half our platoon. Well, we needed that entire case of ammo if our whole platoon was there to get good training.
Right.
But we didn't know. And there's some time in every training cycle, every 6 months, that people are going to be out doing something else. You don't know when it's going to come. So you can't say, oh, this time I need more ammo. Unfortunately, that's not the way that it works.
Right. And so that this is an opportunity for you to like open up the doorway of opportunity. And the benefit of that is like picking up those small scraps. It comes up as your company has won this contract with this division or whatever. And when, they're looking at bids that have submitted for a specific job, you're more likely to be chosen for subsequent jobs if you win a single contract. So it's social proof.
What the government cares about is minimizing risk. So going back to building relationships, my relationship with the government is good because I have what's called past performance. And the government cares greatly about past performance. I know we just painted the government as wasteful.
They are.
But this whole system is to prevent fraud and waste. And what the government cares about is past performance because they want to know that you are trustworthy to do this job. So right now, I'm working on not just increasing my past performance, but increasing the size of jobs that I get. So then they say, oh, you're good with $100,000. We're going to give you $200,000. You're good with 2. We're going to give you 5. You're good with $500,000. We'll give you $1 million job. So past performance, they want to know that you can handle the job, that you're able to complete on time and within budget and to spec. It doesn't matter what it is. If it's delivering toilet paper, they want to make sure that it's exactly what they asked for, it's delivered correctly, on time, within budget. So past performance is the number one. Now that sounds like a barrier to entry because you get more jobs if you have past performance. But how do I get past performance? A year ago, I had won 0 contracts. Now I've won 7 contracts. Some of them that will be paying me for the next 5 years, all because I just started submitting bids. Now, there are some government entities that will work with small businesses. I had mentioned Health and Human Services. They're a smaller government entity. Not during COVID. They were the largest spender during COVID, but compared to the Department of Defense, they're smaller. The industries that like working with people, the Bureau of Land Management is small. Even the National Park Service or the Forest Service.
That's a cool one. You had a guy who I introduced you to who was reaching out, and his friend's company was a government contractor. And what he did is he provided these like portable cities for wildland fire deployment. So when there's wildfire, they deploy all these firefighters. They need a place to cook and eat and shower and sleep. And so all of these like portable villages would pop up, and his company supplied those resources. Like that was his niche, right?
That's it. And that's an easy way to get in the door. That company, I've talked with them as well. And they started off, I think, with just lighting, and they just provided lighting. And then they took the money from that, and maybe they bought a tent, and then they're providing lighting and a tent, and then several more. They might have rented their stuff first. Now they own, like you said, these entire villages for fire camps in California, Oregon, Washington. So this past performance, working with smaller federal companies, you can get past performance by saying, in the private sector, I've done this. I'm a concrete worker. I've done these jobs in the past 5 years. I've done local jobs, state jobs. Those help because you can show, hey, I've done this work. I had none of that. I have done some construction myself. I put that on there, but mostly I was brand new. So I win my first contract. Now I have past performance. I won 2 more within a month. 3 is really good past performance. 5, they're saying, okay, this guy knows what he's doing now. He is reliable. He can finish jobs. Now it's about getting jobs that are like jobs. So if you want $1 million job, if I've never done concrete before, I'm going to say, what? Have you done a concrete job in the past 5 years? No, I never have. I've only sold tires. Well, come on, man. At least have something that's close, right? Because people do a bad job. Construction is risk.
Right.
And the government is risk averse. So therefore, they're looking for you. That's part of the past performance.
Let's talk about numbers here. So when you win a bid, part of like winning the bid is like who's going to provide the cheapest bid. Is that when we were in the military, we'd say made by the cheapest bidder as we were like jumping out of airplanes and looking at our parachutes and all that. Is that completely true? Is it always the cheapest bidder, or is it past performance and competitive pricing? Like how are they deciding who wins and who doesn't?
So that's actually a really good question and is a recent change. So now a lot of times for little jobs, it's going to be cheapest bidder, but not always. They're going to go with best value. And this is a recent change in the federal government, probably in the last 3 years, I believe, where there's a new clause that allows them to say best value. So when I look at a contract, I actually look at I can't see exactly how it's rated, but they will say cheapest bidder wins, or someone they like more. I've lost two contracts where I was the lowest price and they went with someone else. The first one was an HVAC install. It was just redoing an AC unit. I found the contractor who originally installed them. He said, I can do that job for $3,500. I was like, sweet. I know what this job pays. I bet I can win this for $7,000. We're both going to make $3,500.
How do you decide what to charge?
It's kind of what I feel that job is worth. If I cover my risk, if I know that my risk is...
There's not just like a flat markup you put on cost of labor and material.
No, every job's different. Some jobs, it could be a feeling I get from the sub where like, okay, I see the margins, or what do I think will win with enough margins that if something goes wrong.
What's your minimum margin? Like you will not bid on a job if you can't make at least what percent over the cost?
I'd try for 20%.
20%. So that means if the job is $100,000, then you're going to make 20,000. You're going to charge 120,000 and you'll make 20,000 of that 120.
Yes. So on best value, this other guy won it. My bid was 7,000 and I said, I know the guy who did this. I was at a conference and I threw together a bid and threw it out there. I did not have a good technical write-up saying, this is how I'm going to fix your AC units. I'm not an AC tech, and I didn't ask this guy for a good technical write-up. Another company put in a good technical write-up. This is exactly how we'll fix it. These are the nuts and bolts. This is what we're going to do. They got that contract for $17,000, even though I was the lowest bidder. So I was like, hey.
They had more confidence that they had technical ability to actually execute on the contract.
So they had best value. They thought this guy is going to do it for $7,000. He's going to do a shitty job. We're going to have to redo this. And then it's wasting the government's time and their money. And they needed this. It was an AC unit for a research facility. So it could not be down. It had to be like, hey, get this thing fixed. And so they said the best value is something that was $10,000 more.
I heard you on the phone the other day. You were talking to a contractor about, you guys were kind of brainstorming about submitting a bid for a particular job. And he was asking you a series of questions on what he could charge for labor. Can we talk about that really quickly?
Yeah. Well, let's talk about that. So I alluded to it a little bit earlier, is that the government sets how much you have to make, not how much you can make. So
they say you have to earn at least this much.
Your guys have to be American citizens, American-made products, and they have to make Davis-Bacon Wage Act. So Davis-Bacon is...
And that's every federal contract is Davis-Bacon?
Every federal contract is Davis-Bacon.
It's not prevailing wage.
It's similar to prevailing wage. You can call it prevailing wage. Some states have a higher prevailing wage.
Okay. And then this would supersede. So for example, if you were doing a job in a state that had prevailing wage was higher than Davis-Bacon, you could bid these contracts based off of Davis-Bacon?
Yeah. And that's something that we were debating about how we could win this contract.
So, and the reason that's important is because you want the most value,
Most value. But I get audited. If I am not paying my guys correctly, it's a $50,000 fine. One of the pages, I can't even submit for payment until I have the hourly wage sheet. And this is what small contractors don't like to do. They're like, I don't want to mess with that. So what I tell them is, I do that. You give me your guys' hours. I'll show you how to fill out the sheet. Give me this timesheet.
This is your value add.
This is my value add. It's one of those things that is a stumbling block, but I've figured it out. And it's not complicated. So yes, generally, let's say your minimum wage for a plumber in your state is $12. The Davis-Bacon wage might be $25 for your county. Every county in America is different. What was $25? That guy has to make $25 an hour, no matter what. So I tell guys, listen, your guys are going to be making more money. And that levels the playing field. So you can't pay your guys less. They have to make this much. If you guys make more, great, make more. But everybody has to be paid on that wage scale, except for, caveat, owners do not. I don't have to pay myself on the wage scale. If you're the owner of a company and you're working out there, one of my guys is that runs the backhoe. Like if he's out there working and he's the owner of the company, he does not have to pay himself a minimum standard.
Got it. So what's the risk here? I asked you, what happens
Yeah.
if you bid a job and it's actually 150,000 instead of 120? You bid it at 120. Now what?
So I've had jobs. I've done that. I carry all the risk because I am what's called a prime contractor. I'm more the GC on a job. Okay. So the contract is not between the sub and the government. It's between me and the government. So whoever, I get the contract and I subcontract to someone else who knows how to do that work or is a specialist in that area. The risk is 100% on me, all of it. So if we go over budget, if someone doesn't show up to work, that's all on me. So the sub may be making more money. He's making his profit no matter what, their construction job, but I'm taking 100% of the risk.
When you say it's on you, does that mean that out of your personal pocket, you'd have to fork up the difference of the cost of?
Yes. Yeah, 100%. So I've had that happen once where I had a contractor, we agreed to a price, and then I won the bid, and they called me, hey, congrats, Tyrel, you got the bid, your company, can you start? And we already had it. I knew what the start date would be. It's within 3 weeks. I was like, yes, we'll start. I called the sub that we had lined up to do the job, and he said he had left for Europe and wouldn't answer my calls. I talked to his second in charge and we don't know anything about that. I don't think we have. It was in California doing a sidewalk. He's like, I don't know if we have enough citizens to put on that job. I don't know what your arrangement was. We can't honor that price. So I had to go find another subcontractor and pay them out of my pocket.
You took a loss on that job or what?
I knew that there was risk on the job. There were some things about the job that I thought, okay, I put a 60% margin on that job because I felt there was risk on it that I didn't like, and it ended up being right. So my margins were probably 10% on a job because it ate into my profits. So my quote unquote profits has my risk baked into it.
So what about like insurance and bonding? Like explain that.
I cover my own insurance. The subs have to cover insurance too.
Insurance if like something goes wrong on the job?
That's just regular insurance, yeah.
What does that run? What's the cost of your insurance?
My cost of insurance? Like right now it's pretty low because I have like $1 million. And if I need to boost it for a job, I'll boost it for that job right now. And it probably runs me $650 a month.
$650?
Yeah.
For contractor insurance?
Now,
what about bonding? What is bonding?
So bonding is your surety. And there's 3 types of bonds. There's bid bonds, payment bonds, and performance bonds. So for some reason, a bond costs 3% of the contract. So whatever the contract price is, I need to bake in an extra. When I say bake in,
is that like a set aside? What do you mean?
It's not a set aside.
Like you straight up have to pay 3%.
Have to pay 3% to a bonding
So part
company.
of your 20% markup, 3% of that. So your profit now is 17%, for example.
Yes.
Got it.
Except for now it's not because it's 3% of the entire pie. If I put in with my profit as well, because the contract is $100,000.
That's part of your price. And then you mark up 20% over that.
I could. I just have to know that 3% of the entire contract is going to be bonding.
What does bonding actually do?
Bonding is what protects the federal government. So if I run out of money and I can't complete the job, or
it's just
I can't,
insurance for them to have
pay,
a budget to continue the project.
That's when you see bonded and insured. When you say, oh, licensed, bonded, and insured, the guys who are trimming your trees.
Yeah.
Let's say they drop that tree on your house and their insurance doesn't cover it. Their bonding will. So how many large construction companies go out of business all the time or get sued all the time? Don't complete projects. Bonding is the surety. It is like another form of insurance that is specifically on that job. It's not all the time. And it's not for physical insurance if someone gets hurt or even damage is done.
It's a set aside strictly for the project.
Yep. It's a set aside. It's damages to the project itself.
Interesting. I never knew that. So actually, I mean, that's helpful even as a real estate investor when you're looking at, I'm always like, are you licensed and bonded? I have no idea I mean, you know, insured, sure. But
bonding is a big deal. And that is my actual limiting factor right now is I just need to get my bonding up because I can go after some of these bigger jobs, but I, again, have to prove past performance to bonding companies to show that I'm worthy.
Well, okay. So this is real. You and I talk about this all the time, but actually this is a super cool episode for me too, because we're always so busy. We don't get time. How often do we get 45 minutes to like sit down and me just ask questions like this, right? So here's my question. This is awesome. And we can see that the government is ramping spending up. My question for you is like, what is your vision for this company? Where are you going? And who do you need? Like, who are you attracting out there in the universe to come on this mission with you? Where are you going? What is the goal? Who are you attracting towards you to get that goal completed?
Okay. So my mission or my goal for this company is to grow it to a $30 million a year company.
You're doing $30 million
in contracts a year.
Contracts.
With 20% margins. My goal for this year is to do $1 million in contracts with 20% margins. So my take home would be 200,000. That's my big goal. Coming from last year where I won my first contract.
Take home would be 200,000 on how much? 30 million?
No, I'm saying my goal this year is for $1 million.
Oh, which would be take home
margins.
of 200,000.
That's my personal goal this year.
So your goal is to produce $6 million a year in income off of government contracts.
Yes.
And who do you need to come into your circle to accomplish that?
That's something that I'm kind of building on the fly. What I need is a team, because that's not something I can do on my own. So many people who are consistently bidding jobs, I've kind of broken it down into 3 categories. Like you're saying, oh, if you got a VA to do this, I'd have someone who is chasing leads, like going and bidding jobs, someone who is following up and running contractors. So it would be like your superintendent. And then I need someone who is just managing contracts, who's submitting the bids and managing the contracts. So then once they come in, that we know, okay, these people are managing these people are managing these. And then it's up to me to direct the company. So when I first started this, I thought everything is active income. There's no way, we talk about passive income in real estate and other assets. Government contracting has some of the sweetest passive income that you can get on long-term contracts. So I just won my first 5-year contract for a guaranteed amount that every year I'm going to do med gas testing. So all hospitals have medical gas, oxygen, whatever else gases that are plumbed into the system. Well, those have to be tested every year and certified and repaired. So I found a company who can do that. They're a small company local to the VA hospital, and VA hospitals only do business with veteran-owned businesses. Mine is a veteran-owned company. So I can get the work and then partner with a small company doing this med gas testing. For the next 5 years, I know that they're going to cut me a check in May and September every year, every 6 months for the next 5 years. And all I'm doing is submitting the paperwork. So it'll take 15 minutes of my time every 6 months to get continuous payment from the government. That is about as passive as it can get.
Yeah.
And that's on top of my active income. So that covers my expenses. How much work do you do on your rental properties, like per month? It's not.
It's more than you think.
It is.
I was just doing it today, actually.
It's not as passive. There's no rental property that's as passive as you want it to be.
No, I would even counter and push back. There's no such thing as passive income in real estate. It doesn't exist. It's not a real thing.
Unless it's syndication.
Even then, it's like you have to look at, distributions and schedules and yeah.
But
yes.
So I remember when I first stumbled on this, because this is my homework, guys. I'm a nerd about government contracting. Since I got into this, I'm excited about it. When I found out there was passive income opportunities, I said, I want that. I'm going to get that. I spent 2 weeks last month. I spent 2 weeks researching it and going after it. And I won one and I focused strictly on that for 2 weeks. And now I have income for 5 years.
Yeah. It's pretty incredible. And it's really exciting to watch your journey here. Where can people find you? Like your website, information about you?
Yeah. LinkedIn, Tyrel Rose. Just find me on LinkedIn. I'm not on the socials right now. And probably the most social marketing thing that I do right now is this podcast.
Yeah.
You don't need a website to do government contracting. I have a landing page, but it's not.
Just where people can kind of look at your company and who you are, what you do.
Yeah. So
more for credentialing.
Yep, exactly. So if someone wants to connect with me, LinkedIn's the place right now.
This is awesome. And this is where we're going to follow Tyrel on his journey to 30 million in annual contracts. So anyways, hope you guys got some value out of this week's episode. Super cool. And obviously always a pleasure to interview my best friend at his house while our kids are playing in the background in a disheveled garage with the pull-up bar behind us that we were just working out on earlier. Anyways, catch you guys on the flip side. See you next week.